Okay, so Chris Shelton, wow, this is quite an honor. I always think that after doing this and talking to so many big names that I'm not going to get starstruck, but I am a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. Here you are. You were a high-level member of the Church of Scientology until just 6 years ago, roughly. You were in it hardcore at the top levels for 25 years straight. You've written a book since then called Scientology A to Xenu. You've been featured on a panel of experts on Leah Remini's Scientology and the Aftermath show. I did quite a bit of research last night. I was up till like 3 a.m. And man, once I saw the surface, I did not know how far that rabbit hole went. And those folks at Scientology, well, first I'm going to ask you, let's get your plugs out of the way up front. So anything you want to plug, and then we'll do plugs at the end. But my first question to you is going to be, are you afraid for your safety? Because some of these guys are out to get you. You know that. Okay.
I do. And it's not paranoia when they are really out to get you, right? So I don't, go to any kind of extreme lengths in my personal life to protect my privacy. I'm pretty open on social media. I share, what's going on with my existence and stuff. And I thought that was almost a pre-calculated or premeditated strategy to just not have a bunch of deep, dark secrets and skeletons in my closet and stuff, because that's when you give them powers, when they can find those things and dig them up and expose you. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just lead a fairly open life and that sort of thing. And that's worked fairly well. In fact, actually, I'd say it's worked perfectly well. But I have had trolling. I do have a hate website with my name there, and a nice video for my ex-wife, lambasting me and calling me a horrible person. But I have not experienced, and I count myself lucky and fortunate in this, that I have not experienced any physical stalking or in-person harassment over the years. It's bad enough when they come after you online and they character assassinate you, and there are ill effects of that, and that's never fun to experience. But I'm not afraid for my personal safety.
I've written 2 books, the second of which has depictions of Muhammad in it, and it was written under a pen nom de plume, but since then I've kind of come forward as the author. I am hesitant to, I'm not near as high profile of a personality as you, and I think once you reach a certain tipping point, that's when I would feel like my life is even more in jeopardy. I don't know how.
You're right about that. And you're absolutely right, because it is exposure. Cults don't like exposure. And if you're just somebody who has a little channel and is talking to a few hundred people or a few thousand people at a time, groups like Scientology or the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons or the Catholics or any of these groups, and I have to be a little bit careful because not all of them are destructive cults, but they certainly act culty sometimes. But all of these groups are really only concerned about their critics because of the threat that the critic, has to them, or the perceived threat. It was the day after I first appeared on Leah Remini's show that the hate website got posted. They'd obviously had it ready in the wings. I mean, they shot video of my ex-wife. They had it all edited, post-produced, etc. I mean, everything was ready to go. They just needed to hit the button, but they didn't choose to hit the button until I appeared on actual national or international cable television and told, talked about what I talked about with Leah and Mike. So yeah, it's, so having the channel for years up until that point, I didn't experience anything like that. So it's definitely a point of, I guess, how effective you are or how effective they think you are. And on this note, I actually want to just make a little point that you, me, other people who really should not judge our actions or efforts based on the response we get from the cults, because just because they don't perceive us as somebody who could do damage to them or impinge on their ability to abuse people, which is really what it's all about at the end. Just because they don't think we're a threat doesn't mean we aren't. You know? And I think I've done a lot of good over the years, and I have gotten a lot of people out of Scientology and other destructive cults. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I say that because the threat's real. I actually do that work. I have emails. I have in-person conversations. I have phone calls. I have Skype calls with people and with family members, getting them out of these groups. And so I know I'm doing the good work, and other people are like you and other YouTubers are also doing the good work. And just because we don't get, you know, the attention of others, you know, doesn't necessarily mean we're not doing the good work.
Right. Even for the smaller YouTubers like us, even though we're not on the enemy's radar, so to speak, doesn't mean we aren't effective. I understand. Yeah. Man, I'm going to try to keep this down to an hour, but I have so many things I want to ask you. So it's going to be a shotgun blast to the face. Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's start with, okay, the reason I felt now would be a great time, strike while the iron's hot, is you recently, on social media somewhere, you were just opining, just brainstorming, throwing spaghetti at the wall, just talking about how it seems you were trying to draw a correlation between our current president's personality traits and what those from which you experienced Sea Org members, Sea Org meaning the top level, kind of the clergy of the Church of Scientology. So those Sea Org members, their personality traits, you tied them to our current president, and you said it's oddly similar. So what I'm going to ask you, the first thing is, I'm just going to list off a couple of traits that I found, and you tell me if they kind of fit. First, we're going to look at narcissistic behavior traits, and I'm going to go on down. Instead of just the personal symptoms, we're going to look at people with narcissistic personality disorder have trouble handling anything they perceive as criticism, and they can become impatient or angry when they don't receive special treatment. You feel that applies?
Yeah, definitely. Scientology and destructive cults in general, I think this is a safe statement that could be made about them, is that they certainly encourage, if not outright create, narcissism or conceit or arrogance. And narcissism shouldn't be seen just as just another synonym for egotism or conceit, but because it's sort of taken to 11, you know, you turn the dial way up on that stuff to get to narcissism. But this kind of attitude, this arrogance, is sort of inculcated. It's created. It's fostered. You want that in these groups, because that is the kind of strength of will and intensity that you need to keep these little destructive groups going and justify or rationalize why they can be so abusive, because they're pretty abusive, harmful groups. When we talk about our president, we're talking about somebody who, without question, by both professionals and lay people, has been called out as a narcissist, even a malignant narcissist, which is kind of a whole nother level. And this is reflected in his daily actions. Intentions are something you can see in character over time. A person can say one thing, but what they do and what they put out there is what they really intend to do and what they're really all about. And Trump is very, very clearly a man who is obsessed with himself and with his public image and with how he is, viewed by others on now, of course, as president on an international world stage. Previously, he was just pretty much in New York, and he was just this kind of shoddy businessman and did his shoddy deals and liked his gaudy gold and, these trappings and this kind of stuff. And kind of, in the bigger picture, a fairly harmless person. But you become president of the United States, you're no longer that. It doesn't matter who you are. Every single thing about you is going to be magnified. And when you're a narcissist, and Trump is a narcissist, that's not a good place to have a narcissist. That office is one that requires careful consideration, the most, strained thinking about what you're going to do, about thinking through the consequences, intended and unintended of every one of your actions. I'd be very, very hard pressed to ever contemplate holding such an office. The responsibility, the burden of the office, we see it in every single president. Their hair goes routinely white in office, you know. So you put a narcissist there. Well, this is somebody who, by definition, is incapable of experiencing empathy or tolerance or compassion towards others. Those parts just don't work. And the self-centeredness of it, right? So it's much more dangerous to have a person like that in that position. And I feel qualified to speak on this because I have been there, done that as a cult member myself, and as somebody who has created that attitude in others. And when I saw that happening in the world here in the United States during the election, I felt only because of this, and I want to stress this, this has nothing to do with the politics of this. This has to do with the character of the
his
man.
mannerisms and behavioral cues, his physical cues, nonverbal cues, right? Yeah.
Everything about him. Exactly. So we don't want that kind of personality. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, or if you're a liberal or a conservative, or you're a red or a blue or a black or a white or a green or a yellow. It doesn't matter. If that's your personality disorder, you should not be in a position where you have undue influence over other people. And there is no one on this planet who has more undue influence over the lives of more people than the President of the United States. That's just the way things are right now. Yep. So that's my argument against Donald Trump as president. And the comparisons are very, very clear between Trump as a cult leader and the narcissism that's experienced by cult followers.
Well, Chris, let me run. I'm just going to shotgun through a few of these, and I think we're on the same page as the president exhibiting almost probably all these, if not, almost all, if not all. But as I read these off, tell me at the end what jumps out at you as a similarity between the Sea Org members. Significant interpersonal problems, easily feeling slighted, reacting with rage or contempt, and trying to belittle the other person to make themselves appear superior, having difficulty regulating emotions and behavior, experiencing major problems dealing with stress and adapting to change, feeling depressed or moody because they fall short of perfection, having secret feelings of insecurity, shame, vulnerability, and humiliation.
All of those, what those bring to mind right off is Sea Org executives. Within the world of Scientology, you have all the public Scientologists, people who pay for services, come and do their time, go on classes, go do their counseling. I'm not talking about those people. That's your base of Scientologists who pay money, do their time, but they have jobs, they have kids, they have lives, they have houses, picket fences, etc. They're not on the fringes of Scientology. They're the core, they're sort of but they're the outer circle of Scientology. As you move into the core, you get what's called, you get staff members who work at the city level churches. And then at the highest levels, you get the Sea Org, the Sea organization. And this is the core group of Scientology. This is 4,000 or 5,000 people internationally. And there are executives who run the different different departments and organizations of the Sea Org. It's broken down into many, many different sub-organizations and units. And what that list you were just reading down was almost one for one a character description of every single executive in the Sea organization, created that way by the pressure and heat generated from Miscavige, previously Hubbard, now Miscavige, as a cult leader. This is what cult leaders do. And this mindset, anyone should see, and I wish they could, that it's a destructive mindset. There is no upside to this mindset. There is no silver lining to the dark cloud here. This is just dark cloud. You don't want this kind of personality in charge because they are short-sighted. They are self-centered, because it's all about, and I've been in this position many times as a Sea Org executive, your actions and your efforts are being taken in an effort at self-preservation. You're in a hostile, dangerous work environment, probably the most hostile one you can imagine in the Sea Org, right? And I mean, short of, say, combat. And and you have an incredible amount of pressure on you, right? And the motto in the Sea Org, or one of the things they say in the Sea Org, is that diamonds are made through heat and the application of heat and pressure. And coal, if you fall to pieces, well, then you were just a piece of coal to start with, right? But we're trying to make you into a blue-white diamond. So we're going to apply all this heat and pressure to you, right? And so when you create that environment and you're creating narcissism, all I'm trying to make the point of here is that you are not creating effective leaders who are going to accomplish the goals of your organization. Whatever your organization and whatever the goals are, it's not going to come off well. Even if your goals are destructive, it's still not going to come off as well as if you didn't have narcissists in these positions, and this is something I just wanted to sort of stress to your listeners.
Yeah. I'm going to switch gears real quick. I took the liberty of drawing up what I think maybe are some correlations. You tell me if I'm on the mark or not. One is demanding 100% belief in something despite evidence probably to the contrary. And the correlation I want to draw is with Scientologists, the idea of maybe thetans or reincarnation or some of these wacky beliefs. We all know them, but some of these that cannot be substantiated, and then tie that to Trump's overriding inability to separate fact from fiction when, he gets these. Now, whether they're true or not, for instance, the server in Ukraine, there may or may not have been a server in Ukraine. There may or may not have been Ukrainian influence in the last election cycle. We don't have evidence to support that, but he is fully on board. Now, we could talk about why that is. Maybe, because him and Putin are buddies and he wants to draw attention away from every three-letter agency in the United States that said Russia did it. And that is substantiated by fact. So I'm drawing that conclusion, that correlation.
Absolutely. And the thing that the core of Trump and the core of narcissism is the person himself. And this is where the individual actually believes, truly, that just because they say or think a thing, it must be true. It simply is that way. That how I speak, how I think, this is reality. Objective reality, as far as that person is concerned. And this is where narcissists really lose touch with reality. Because, of course, no one, there is no human being who speaks and thinks reality. We are all very biased. We all have our perception problems. We all have our education, cultural, age, etc. I mean, all these factors create all kinds of biases that we have, and none of us are spewing objective reality. But narcissists truly, truly believe that they are. So you get somebody like Trump at the head of the American government, and he actually believes that what he says is true, and that if you question what he says, you're the one who's off the rails. You're the one who's crazy. You're the hater. You're the denier. You're the fake news. I mean, we've been watching this since day one of this play out. All these mantras and tropes and nonsense that he spews are all coming from this base idea that his view of the world and reality and himself is the only view that actually matters. And no one else really has anything else to say about it. There's nothing he's going to take in from other people and go, oh, that's a good point. I should have thought of that. I don't know. Okay, well, let me adjust my thinking.
You've never heard him say that ever.
Not once.
No.
And this is classic. This is why it's so easy to say that there's classic narcissism here, is because we never see that. And it's what you don't see that is sometimes the hardest thing to spot because it's not in your face. But it's exactly the point you just made, right? You never see him do this. You never see him admit he was wrong. You never see the Church of Scientology admit they're wrong. You never saw Jim Jones admit he was wrong. You never see any of these cult leaders admit they're wrong, it's impossible for them to. They can't contemplate that thought.
Sorry to jump in, Chris.
No,
I
go
got
right
three
ahead.
things on the tip of my brain right now, and I'm gonna.
Yep.
I'm gonna forget it if I don't say them. First off, probably should have said this closer to the front of the show, but there are 4 hosts of the show of Atheist Edge. One of which is pretty right-leaning and agrees with a lot of our current presidents, especially on the economic level. So we are widely varying in our socio-political views. And I just want to put that disclaimer out that even though it's going to look like we're taking a huge dump on Trump right now, which we are, but just remember, I don't speak for all of Atheist Edge. And there's another host that would really have a problem with what we're saying right now, at least in some small part. Second, this ties in nicely to a talk I'm going to be a part of on December 6th. It's a monthly gathering of atheists and Christians, and we're going to be talking about The Secret. So when you were talking about like speaking reality into existence, I said, we're going to be talking about this, and it's going to be that one time that the atheists and Christians at this monthly book club are probably going to agree on a lot of things. But
excellent. Well, let me speak real fast to those viewers who might, if they're still bothering to listen after we've so thoroughly trashed Trump here as an individual. Let me be super, super clear that I would probably end up agreeing with a lot of things your co-host would be talking about in terms of economics. I've got all kinds of economic and social, political views that are all over the spectrum. And I'm more than happy to have conversations about those, entertain those ideas, look at the pros and cons of them. Those are evidence-based, substantial conversations you can have and look at and bring in facts and figures, and you can have conversations about that. I want to stress that you have not heard me say one thing about Trump's policy positions, and that's because my problem with man has nothing to do with, or very little, I should say, not nothing, but very little to do with the policies that he voices or talks about, or is conservative or so-called conservative.
Great distinction.
Talking points or positions.
Yep.
That has nothing to do with my problem with Trump, really. It has to do with the fact that we have I believe, mentally deranged individual in charge of the nuclear codes. And I think that we could all find common ground there to come to some agreement on the fact that we shouldn't put people with such massive and obvious personality disorders or mental illnesses in charge of the nuclear weapons.
I would stop short maybe of saying deranged or mental illness, but I have said, I have echoed what other YouTubers have said about obvious mental decline, cognitive decline. We can definitely agree on that. And not Alzheimer's, but what's that other one?
I'm sorry let me super clarify what I just said. I didn't just call the president mentally ill. I said anybody who is mentally ill should not be in that position. Gotcha. That was not a statement.
Right.
And I can see the dot connecting that's already happening. So sorry for putting that out there in that way. It wasn't meant to say Donald Trump is mentally ill, because narcissism is not considered a mental illness. It's a personality disorder.
Right.
And that is what you could call a mental derangement. You could use that word, and that's why I did.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't mean that he's mentally ill as in he's psychotic, he's, a potential murderer, he's, he can't see reality in some fashion. I'm not saying or making those claims.
I will go on record, though, as saying, now, of course, this is a layman diagnosis, but sure. I will go out on a ledge and say it's at the very least some sort of dementia. It might not be an Alzheimer's, but he has a cognitive decline, and based on the evidence I have, which is not great evidence, but it's enough for me to lean towards him being maybe an abuser of amphetamines, like Sudafed, ephedra, some sort of over-the-counter, but not available in the United States. It's
rough because we don't have objective third-party judgment on any of this, and we have the Surgeon General who apparently our first Surgeon General was a perv or something. I mean, he had to go. So now we have another, during the time of the Trump administration. Remember that guy?
Yep.
So now we have another one, and we're supposed to rely on those people who are appointed by the president, work in the executive branch. I mean, it's all a little bit too close to itself to self-regulate or police, and we've really seen in this administration, for some of us, some of the problems.
Just to clarify for the viewers, on your screen right now, I will pull up a photo, and it's a kind of a famous photo of Trump eating his taco bowl on Cinco de Mayo in Trump Tower. But if you zoom into the cabinet behind him, you will see a massive amount of what is basically amounts to over-the-counter amphetamines. Now, the reason I say this, I don't want to belabor this, but half of those boxes of Sudafed in that drawer, they're like up to 5 times the U.S. allowed dosage. These can only be bought outside of the United States. And there are just boxes upon boxes. That's one piece of evidence. His sniffing, you can tell in his speeches when he's on his upper, when he's on his high, because he's animated, his face is bright red, he's relatively articulate. Then you can tell when he's on his down, because what happens with these abuse of the Sudafed or whatever, when you come down off of it, then you start to exhibit the symptoms that you were originally taking it for in the first place, like sniffing, slurred speech, and just a cognitive slowness. He's reading directly off the teleprompter very slowly. I don't want to belabor that, but that was just the point I was going to make. I'm going to run through the rest of my little brainstorming session, and you tell me what just jumps out at you as it relates to Sea Org members. Lying, getting caught, telling. Okay, so if they're caught in a lie, they'll tell a bigger lie to make up for that lie. They're both openly gay, hostile, and support anti-gay legislation, in fact, to the point of hostility. They distance, throw accusers under the bus. We know that. I know there's a word for that in Scientology. I can't remember it. Former allies who were once strong allies and who become even slightly critical of them get just hammered. And I'll stop there. That's probably a lot to take in.
Well, that last one is probably one of the more cultic phenomena you're describing there too. All of this stuff exists in every kind of organization you're ever going to find, and people can rationalize this behavior because of that. They see people, climbing over the tops of others to get, a promotion, or they see people lying, or they see unsavory behavior or unethical behavior, and they think, well, this is just everywhere and all people are like this. But you have to differentiate. It's really important to differentiate here that when you're talking about a cult situation, you're talking about that behavior on steroids. You're talking about dialing it up to 11. This is an important concept. It's not a small thing. Lying, everybody lies, but the lies that are told by occultists are impressive. I mean, they are really something. The mental gymnastics a person has to go through to rationalize telling those kinds of lies, to rationalize why it's okay to behave the way that they do, or truly awful ways, all the way to the extremes of rationalizing pedophilia, child sexual assault, any kind of sexual assault, really. Financial irregularities, banging people's credit cards way beyond what they were authorized to give, this kind of thing. All that kind of criminal or non, very unethical behavior comes from the same brains, right, that create the Mona Lisa, right? I mean, it's the same thing, right? We have this amazing creative power, and that creativity that we have can go toward a good direction or can go toward a bad direction. And when you start imbuing narcissism into a personality, into anybody's personality, which is what cults do, you get a tendency in the direction of the bad behavior, objectively bad behavior anybody would pretty much say would call out as bad. and it becomes more routine and more regular for the person in their life, and they just get more and more. It becomes easier and easier. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
You start down a path, and then it becomes easier and easier and easier to justify it. And before you know it, you are doing things you never even would have conceived of doing the day you first showed up there.
When you first drew this parallel, I had never thought of it before. So that's precisely why I've wanted you on the show, but this is the greatest opportunity because I don't know if you've addressed it in this fashion. But back to what you were saying about Scientologists, specifically Sea Org members, throwing people under the bus that are even slightly critical, even those on the inside, and then just completely turning on them. We see it right now with the Trump. Well, we've been seeing it for the last 3+ years, but right now, currently with his attorney, he's starting to distance himself again. It's not the first time, but he's starting to say, well, he works for, he's a lot of other people's lawyer too. He doesn't just work for me. He might have went to the Ukraine, and good on him because he's a warrior, but I didn't send him there. And he's starting to do the same old trick he's been doing ever since. And before you know it, he's going to, just if history repeats itself, he's going to be turning on Giuliani like it's cool. And once he starts singing like a canary, probably.
Exactly. And this is, again, it's a consequence of the short-sightedness. The thing about always feeding your own ego and always having to feed your own ego and having to twist reality around so that it feeds your ego is you have to twist reality. There's no way around it. I mean, and again, it's not like we don't all do this. Everybody lies to themselves, but the narcissist takes it to a level that is actually difficult for regular people to understand because they can't conceive of how twisted a person can make reality to fit with their picture of how reality is supposed to be. And to a narcissist, reality is everything's about me, and I'm the greatest thing in the world, and everybody cares and revolves around my wishes and desires. That's really the point, the core of the sickness, right, or the personality disorder. So, I use sickness in a loose way there. I'm not trying to talk about mental illness as such. It's a very difficult thing to define, but we do know that narcissism isn't an optimal way of behaving, no matter who you are or what your belief spectrum is. So this is why it's so, I'm going to keep belaboring this business of why it's so destructive to have this in place. And this is why following narcissists, or, who often become these destructive cult leaders, results in this crazy black and white us versus them thinking, where you're willing to throw other people under the bus just like that. The second somebody, loyalty, Trump's always going on about loyalty. This is the heart and soul of a narcissist's inner circle, is people who are loyal to that person, not people who tell the truth, not people who necessarily tell lies. It's just somebody who is loyal. They will do whatever you tell them to do. That's the cherished, desired character quality. And you wonder why such incompetent people are surrounding Trump right now. And they are truly incompetent. I mean, I'm talking to business professionals, economic professionals, Wall Street professionals. This is not me saying this. This is literally these professionals I've talked to across a broad range of professions who have told me one for one, the Treasury Secretary, the Chief of Staff, the military people, education. All of these are incompetents,
Yep.
So why would you surround yourself with incompetent people? Well, if they're the ones who are telling you everything you want to hear, and that's really the defining characteristic you need from somebody who's going to be under you, is they're going to tell you what you want to hear. That's bad leadership 100% of the time.
Yep. Let me get through my spitball. This was my 3 a.m. spitball. Trying to draw a correlation. I got 2 more. You just tell me your take on this. Totalitarian or authoritarian personality seeking to control people's personal lives. And my correlation that I thought of was the Trump administration pulling out of Syria despite the generals and the experts warning not to. And on the Scientology side, banning their members from looking on the internet, certain internet sites, controlling.
Yeah, I would draw correlations with the religious right on this one in terms of any political or Trump connections, because he's very heavily aligned himself with the religious right, the evangelicals, and or rather, I should say, the evangelicals have aligned themselves with him. And these are people who do not believe in bodily autonomy. They think that abortion is murder, and so everything is seen through this filter of murder. And I get it. I actually get that point of view. It's not like it's that hard to see where they're coming from. They're just wrong. I mean, it's just not how you view life, you know. So but I get it. I get the moral position there, and I get how difficult that is for them. But the fact of the matter is that position makes them feel entitled to interfere in the personal lives of every single American in the country. Right? And you see this reflected in the anti-abortion laws, which are so crazy that in Ohio, they're even trying to forward a law right now that is impossible for doctors to comply with, right? They have to like the endotopic or something pregnancy, right? This thing with this. So, you know, these are people who are not bashful about interfering in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And they've aligned themselves with Trump and his presidency because they know that in him they have a man who will be happy to forward their religious agenda, to tear down the walls between separation of church and state. He'll be more than happy to tear that down, so long as they keep telling him what he wants to hear. And what Trump wants to hear is that he's king of the world. He's the man. He is chosen by God to lead the nation, and they are happy to keep telling him that, so long as they get their bills signed and they get their Supreme Court judges and federal judges in place so that they can ensure that abortion will become overturned and will no longer be the law of the land. And in fact, that they can heavily prosecute any doctor and any woman who dares think for themselves or tries to, have some bodily autonomy or some choices in their life. So that's where I see it most prominently. I know that's not exactly what you wrote there, so I sort of side railed there, but
That's fine.
I think that's a more obvious and blatant connection between Trump and how he's literally trying to interfere in the personal lives of millions and millions of American women. And he really just doesn't have any right to be doing that. Neither does the religious right. But they feel very entitled to it because of their whole, belief system. So
I've always said the worst damage that will come out of this administration is by far and away the Supreme Court nominees and the lower district court nominees. It's going to affect us negatively for at least the next generation, which is just unfortunate as hell. My last one, false propaganda with the current administration faking this huge migrant invasion that we should, twice he said he used it.
Yep.
He specifically used this migrant invasion scare twice to just deflect from other issues that were affecting him. And with Scientology, here was my example. I don't know if it's good or not, but if you learn OT3 too early, if you somehow get a hold of this information, it could cause cancer. It could have negative benefits on you, and it could kill you.
Yes,
So
that's propaganda. Yeah, no, that's correct. Those are both instances of false propaganda. And let's talk about, why the need for that. Why would you have to be pushing fake news? And it comes from, and in both places, it comes from the same thing. It comes from the desire, the need, the obsession, really, for validation, right? For that you're right, that the narcissist, right? That the narcissist is right. The narcissist is the one who's in charge. So here's Trump, and he's got this position that he's taken. He's chosen that they're going to have a wall and that the immigrants are going to be the bad guys, especially the Mexican immigrants, but anybody from down south, because nobody's, you notice he never mentions one word about Chinese immigrants, Canadian immigrants, European immigrants. I mean, it's all about the brown people, the Muslims and the Latinos, right? Anybody from South America or Mexico. So Trump has a real problem with those people because that's the position that he's taken. So he has to say and do anything necessary to justify why he's right. Because again, he can't ever be wrong. And this is where all this propaganda comes into play, and where he will use any news outlet or any medium or bullhorn that will echo his statements or anything that will support him and his statements. And he has to. See, the funny thing that people don't get about this is the substance of the arguments don't matter to the narcissist. That's not the point. The point is that they have to be right. And everybody else has to therefore be wrong. And anything goes when it comes to this. And the substance of the issue doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we're talking about climate change. It doesn't matter if we're talking about space travel. It doesn't matter if we're talking about, how many ants can dance on the head of a pin. It doesn't matter what the topic is. The narcissist has to be right. And when you're the president, you have got a many machines operating under you. You've got a media machine. You've got a government machine. You've got a military machine. You've got a White House machine. You've got all this stuff that is in motion, that you're entering into this world, and you're the senior over this entire thing. So everything exists to support what you're doing and try to forward, the policies and actions of the executive division. It's been built that way over all these, over a couple centuries now, so that things work more than they don't work. But when you put somebody in charge who can't see reality for what it is, because their veil or their filter is a mirror, then you're going to get decisions and policies and actions that are going to look, and because they are, absolutely nuts. And we see this periodically coming out of the Trump administration, and as well as of course claiming credit for things they never had anything to do with. All the good stuff comes from me. All the bad stuff is somebody else's fault. That's the narcissist's party line, and that's L. Ron Hubbard. That's David Miscavige. That's Donald Trump. Right? Yep. It's always that way. And in saying that, let me stress one more thing real fast. In saying that, you notice through this whole episode, I never said anything about Hillary's not a narcissist. Obama doesn't have some narcissistic qualities to him. All politicians have this in some fashion or another. It really is a generality that holds. You get into politics in the first place, there's something a little bit self-serving about you, because that's the nature of the game as we play it. So we can safely make those kind of statements about all these guys, but we have to stress that not everybody is as bad or as good or is as the same as everybody else. And Trump excels at this in a way that no other politician I've ever seen in my entire life, since Nixon really, has. And that's quite a strong statement. And I think it's a necessary level of nuanced understanding of what's going on right now. Unfortunately, Trump supporters don't see that nuance, and that's par for the course for, cultists.
Chris, you are creating questions faster than I can ask them.
Okay, sorry.
No, this is beautiful. This is awesome. Okay, so with regard to your original point, I do think that a great litmus test to decide if you are down this narcissistic path is to look back just a calendar year and see how many times you've admitted you were wrong on a substantial issue. So if you can't do that, and I know goddamn well Donald Trump can't do that, and I can prove that I've done it on 4 major issues just in 2019. So that is an objective standard right there. Then you talked about the former Secretary of State and the former president, and you never once said, hey, well, maybe this is, now I don't know the cause and effect here. Are you a narcissist and you gravitate towards politics, or does being in politics maybe bring out your inner narcissist? So there's a cause and effect there. And
well, it's not actually, it's a false dilemma, because it's both.
Right, exactly.
It's context specific. Depends on the person you're talking about.
I think there's a little of both. And I think,
Yeah.
then I started thinking YouTubers. Now, we only have, we're not even, dare I say, a medium fish in the sea as far as atheist YouTubers, but we're known. We've had some big names on beside yourself, and we're climbing that ladder. And I've been accused, and I see others way bigger than me accused constantly of displaying these symptoms. And now that I'm kind of in the loop, I have to constantly remind some of our more critical viewers, listen, it is a fine line between pushing yourself, narcissistic behavior, and pushing your brand. Sometimes they can look very similar.
Of course. I mean, you would not call George Lucas a narcissist if he said, "Hey, you should go watch Star Wars." You know, like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But when it's all me, and, you know, and there's just no objective question about the fact that in the world of Donald Trump, it is all about me, you know? And he is the one who created that situation, by the way. He didn't have to put his own name on all of his own products. He could have come up with some other name. Well, everybody, you know, lots of people do. He didn't have to do or make the decisions that he made along the way. It's clear that he made them because he's all about him.
Well, his name is his only selling point. That's
right.
He didn't.
But he made it that way.
Tower, he's selling his name, the ability for them to make money on their property to buy his name from him. Putting Trump on a tower, putting Trump on a steak or vodka, or a failed university that's accused of fraud, or a nonprofit organization that doesn't really give to it was already, you know, convicted of fraud or whatever.
Oh God, they shut that whole nonprofit down because it was just a cash cow for him. He was just using it as a slush fund.
I don't know if you're aware of this, and I probably wouldn't get to it otherwise, but you made me think. Actually, the Donald J. Trump Foundation donated, it was only $10,000, I think, to Scientology shortly after you already know this, the 9/11, for the firefighters to go through their talk about
the
this
purification program. Yeah,
it was a purification program.
So the cleanup, the detox. New York detox. Yeah, they were doing the Scientology sauna program to help the firefighters after 9/11. And I would applaud the effort, except it's so backwards because the purification detox program is hogwash. It doesn't actually do anything like it claims it's doing. So, yeah, nice effort, nice to try to help the firefighters after 9/11, but you didn't help. You only made things worse. It was a Band-Aid at best. And that was the effort Scientology made. And so, I guess Trump.
I don't want to get off on a tangent, but
that was Tom Cruise.
What was it?
That was Tom Cruise pushing that. Tom Cruise was calling in a lot of markers on getting the money together to make that thing happen. And I don't know that he had a marker on Donald Trump. I'm just saying that that's where the money came from. It wasn't Scientology pimping that so much as it was Tom Cruise personally making that happen.
I don't know much about the detox program, but from what I do know, it involves maybe fasting, long periods of time in a sauna, things that aren't. There's no peer-reviewed literature on this. There's no objective declaration of efficacy in the scientific world on it. So, correct. Okay, we're on the same sheet.
Yeah, it's total nonsense.
Okay, I'm going to run through. Where am I at? Okay, I'm going to run through, and you just tell me what jump. It's going to be a long list. I'm just going to try to hit the wave tops, and then you tell me some more similarities between Sea Oregon, the current presidential administration. Exaggerated sense of self-importance, sense of entitlement, required constant excessive admiration, inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs or feelings of others, envious of others, and believe others envy them. Okay.
Now, that last point about an inability to recognize the needs of others needs to be commented on because it's another nail in the coffin here. And again, I'm really appealing to people's objectivity here, right? And I get that, that supporters are not going to see any criticism or any issue here as valid. But let me just keep trying anyway. When you're engaged in foreign affairs or you're engaged with another country, sovereign nations, mind you, these are not people who owe fealty or loyalty to Donald Trump or the United States. They are their own countries with their own cultures, their own backgrounds, histories, etc. These are allies. These are people we need to be seen as and relating with as equals, because when it comes to one country versus another, I mean, we have an equal footing in terms of right to exist. Our, financial, common ground, there could be some, I mean, like with NATO and stuff, I understand that there are imbalances there. I understand that European countries don't pay as much as we do, and that there's cause for ire and upset there. I get it. But the attitude in approaching others needs to be that you are going to understand where they're coming from, that you do get what their problems are, that you see them as real people who have real issues that you can help them with, and vice versa. This is how foreign relations is supposed to work. If you have an inability to see anything from another person's point of view or grant them any level of importance or existence, and this is the problem with narcissists, is it's all me. It's all about what I want. It's all about my demands. It's all about what you need to be doing for me. And we've seen this. This has been blatantly stated by Trump over and over and over again in regards to our foreign policy efforts. So some people might look at this and go, well, this is just the pendulum swing that's necessary to get them in line, because we've been being taken advantage of for so long, and these foreign countries have been walking all over us, and it's about time Donald Trump came in and started, calling a spade and dealing with that. Okay, economically, fair enough. I get it, right? There might be some imbalances. There might not. I actually would need to look into that a bit more deeply. I'm just telling you that I get the view. But I'm saying that even despite those inequities or differences, if they truly exist at all, and I'm not sure that they do, but if they do, Donald Trump is still the wrong guy to be implementing those solutions, because he cannot see the world through another lens than his own. He can't see things from Germany's point of view, Europe's or England's or Spain's or whatever. He just can't.
And if he is right, he won't take those ideas into account, just like he does his. He can make a decision on Syria, but he doesn't even listen to his generals, and he got a lot of Kurds killed.
Exactly. And and there are real world consequences for this. We're talking heads. We're sitting here, armchair quarterbacking the president's positions, right? And we get to do that because we're Americans. But I get that there's a lot of levels and nuance to this, and it's all very difficult. I still make the point that at the end of the day, you do not want that guy in charge of your foreign relations or in charge of making military decisions, because they are going to make bad calls again and again and again and again because of this inability to simply understand where other people are coming from.
All right, Chris, are you ready for the speed round?
Boom, bring it.
Here comes the speed round. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. And as tersely, is that a word? As tersely as you can.
Yep, I know.
Give me your definition to these.
Okay.
WOG. What's a WOG?
It's a very, very derogatory term I've come to learn, on par with the N-word, actually, in certain circles, towards Indian or Asian folks.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really bad. Yeah,
but
no, I didn't know this either.
Terms, what is a WOG?
That's right.
Okay.
And in the Scientology world, the reason that this is even coming up is because Hubbard used this word extensively to describe non-Scientologists. He called them WOGs. And that was what we used, and we had no idea it was a racial slur.
I didn't until just now.
Till fairly recently for me. Just a couple of years ago I learned that.
Next one. It's 3. Boohoos, clams, and grim weepers.
Okay, you're pulling some minutia out there. That is old school Scientology, 1952. Evolutionary Scientology. That has to do with Hubbard coming up with reasons and rationales for why and how we evolved as organic biological creatures, and had spiritual awareness of earlier states of our bodies and our being down the evolutionary line. In other words, what were we as spiritual beings doing on planet Earth 75 million years ago? Well, we were in mollusks, and we were in clams, and we were swimming around in the oceans and stuff. Hubbard dropped this entire line, changed it later, said it was all bunk, and that none of that actually happened. But in 1952, that was Scientology as it was.
So he changed the doctrine.
On that specific point, he did. He said later on that evolution was not true. It was all a mental implant by bad guys, and life did not actually evolve the way Darwin said it.
I have in my notes here, this is my understanding of it. So when our souls, I guess the synonym, the corollary of souls would be the thetan, the theta. That's an extraterrestrial entity. So when it was actually brought to, I forget the name of Earth, Teliac or Keziak?
Tegiak.
Yeah, okay.
Tegiak.
So when it was
here's the thing. This doesn't go hand in hand with the Tegiak stuff.
Oh, okay. So when it was
These
brought
are different.
to the early Earth, when our souls were brought here for whatever reason, it could involve DC-8s flying through space or volcanoes and all that. Okay. So when these thetans came and implanted into whatever was here and was evolved, early hominids, I would assume, that the boohoos, clams, and grim weepers are latent, primal, something that came from before the thetans were put into the hominids, and this is the cause of why we belch, why we say things, why we have no filter sometimes, and why we cry, why we feel emotions. Is that...
You're not far off from one totally valid interpretation of what Hubbard was writing back then.
Okay.
He didn't really specify a whole lot in this. This comes out of a tiny little book called History of Man. The problem with Scientology, one of the biggest problems with Scientology, is its lack of internal consistency and, in fact, full-on contradictions. So Hubbard writes about this stuff that was going on in planet Earth, millions and trillions of years ago, and then he changes his mind in the 60s and says, actually, no, that was all not true. This whole new cosmology is true, and this is where we bring Tegiak and Xenu and all this other stuff into it. So it's not even as clearly defined as there's two dogmas or two sets of cosmologies. It's not even that clear. It's more like bits and pieces were thrown together, and then later on he said, well, that bit wasn't really true, but the rest of it was, and you're left to sort of figure it out for yourself.
Haphazard, slapdash. 4 more. Let's see.
Cool.
You think that was obscure? Get ready for this one. The coffee grinder incident.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You're telling me you're aware of this? I'm trying to get you.
No,
okay.
You got me. No, you're not getting me. I know what these are.
Okay.
Hubbard posited over the millennia that thetans have been around in this universe. And Hubbard claimed that we've been around in this universe for 4 quadrillion years. Earth years, right? If you're gonna measure it all out, and this is of course taking in time.
Billion.
Yeah, no, 4 quadrillion. And in those 4 quadrillion years, we've been slap dancing around here in this physical universe, doing all kinds of crazy things. And life has not always looked like it does here on planet Earth. There have been space-faring civilizations that have risen and fallen. This is why Scientologists love the beginning of Star Wars when it says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. They're like, yes, Lucas got it right. It's not the future, it's the past. So all these crazy ass things have happened to you as a spiritual entity. It hasn't even been that you've always had a body. You've been flitting around spiritually in the universe like a little ghost, traveling around like Casper, flying around, pushing planets around, making planets, making universes, doing all this crazy stuff. 4 quadrillion years is a long ass time. In that time, Hubbard posited that there were bad Thetans, suppressive people, these bad guys, and they were interested in enslaving the rest of us Thetans. And not only were we the enslaved, but we also turned around over the years and became the enslavers as well. We've done both. And over the many years, there have been specific kinds of enslavement, specific kinds of what are called implants, mental implants. You could kind of consider it as like hypnosis with a whole lot of pain and shock and drugs and all kinds of horrible things happening to you to get you to change your mind. And back in the day, a couple quadrillion years ago, it was harder to force a Thetan to change his mind than it is now. Because we were free beings and we had all this power and ability. And then how did we lose all that? Well, we practiced enslaving one another, and we did that by shocking each other and hurting each other and telling each other lies. And the coffee grinder and other things like that are examples of these kind of implants that were done where we try to enslave one another. And this is how we all ended up in this mutual collective garbage heap called planet Earth. And that's what that is.
Unsubstantiated claims, just like Trump's, fictional migrant invasion.
That's right.
Oh gosh.
That's right.
Okay, now I got 2 more tries to get you now. So
yeah,
I fear that I'm not going to be able to, but I'll
this
try
is
again.
Great. I've never had anybody try this. This is awesome.
Mag fucks.
Whoa, what's that?
Mag fucks. It's a name.
I don't know what that.
I'm going to give you.
I've not heard of that.
You're probably going to get it.
Okay.
It refers to people in a certain unit of Scientology. I'm not going to say which yet. They're located in the Hemet headquarters. I guess that's called. Is that Gold Base?
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Golden Era Productions.
It's a subunit. They're in charge of a certain aspect of Scientology, and their nickname is Magfucks. M-A-G
Fucks.
Oh,
M-A-G-F-U-C-K-S?
Okay,
I don't think
here's
I've
the
ever
notes
heard
I've got
of
on
this.
it. They're a central marketing unit, subunit of the church marketing at INT, which is the Hemet headquarters. The magazine unit do the magazines for the church. The magazine motherfuckers was shortened to magfucks. It was a colloquial term, the magazine motherfuckers. It was a term invented by Annie Brooker Tidman, who is kind of like Shelley Miscavige. I guess that's David's wife. She is thought to be there at INT, and she is thought also to be held against, well, I don't know, against her will once you reach a certain point of brainwashing, but she's not allowed to roam because there's a fear that she's going to defect.
Well, okay, so Annie died.
Oh.
So she's dead now. Annie Tidman, or Annie Broker, is dead. She was one of the 3 people who was personally with L. Ron Hubbard when he, at the time of his passing, and when he was in exile, or self-imposed exile. But she and her husband, Pat, were the 2 people who were traveling around with L. Ron Hubbard in his motorhome through the Pacific Northwest, and then eventually settled in Creston, California, outside San Luis Obispo, and lived out the last years of his life. And then Annie ended up divorcing Pat. Pat took off after a power struggle with Miscavige. Annie stayed, and Miscavige really never forgave her and treated her like shit for the remaining years of her life. And she died, I think, not long after. I thought it was in the 2000s, or maybe even in the 90s, but definitely in the 2000s. She passed away. And
it was before you left the church in 2013.
Yeah. And Annie was not somebody that I didn't know anything about her. She was up at the INT base. I didn't know nothing with any of this stuff. Nobody in Scientology does. None of us had a clue about LRH's actual final days. We were given this song and dance nonsense story by David Miscavige when L. Ron Hubbard died, and that's what we all believed. Pat Broker was even there at the L. Ron Hubbard death announcement event in 1986, and he talked about the future OT levels and blah, blah, blah. And then after that event, there was a power struggle, and about a year later, Miscavige was the one left standing. Pat Broker took off, and he ended up getting the sharp end of the stick from Miscavige, and that was how that all went. So it's kind of funny. I guess that was an internal term for something that was going on at the Int base. I never worked at the Int base, so I definitely would not have known.
All right, for the record, I got
That's
you.
a good one. You got me, though. That's good.
I have a feeling you're going to get this with this last one, though. Rock slam.
Yeah, that's a meter phenomena. On an e-meter, the needle does all kinds of different things. And Hubbard described different phenomena the needle does by different patterns that it would engage in, right? It doesn't just fall or rise. It can have little patterns in its movements. And this, for example, the needle on the dial of an e-meter doing this kind of a slow rhythmic sweep, this is called a floating needle. A rock slam is the exact opposite of this. You got somebody on the cans and it's slamming back and forth and moving wildly and crazily about, totally out of control. And what it actually is, I've come to learn, and it took a lot of time for me to figure this out, it's a malfunction. It's an electronic malfunction. A piece of dust or something gets into the
Circuitry.
One of the dials on the meter. Used to be the dust could get in there, and the dust would mess with the connection or the circuit. Other electronic things can go wrong, and this meter can start doing this big, crazy thing called a rock slam. It's really just a busted meter. But get this. L. Ron Hubbard said that if you see a rock slam on an e-meter and it is not, and you prove that it's not a broken meter, you can unplug the person from the meter, and if the meter stops doing it, then clearly it's coming from the person and not the meter. That's not, by the way, a warranted assumption, but that's what L. Ron Hubbard says. If you unplug the person and the meter stops rock slamming, then clearly it's the person doing it. So you plug them back in and it starts rock slamming again. What this means is that whatever this person's talking about right now or thinking about, they have a hidden evil intention.
That's exactly what I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a hidden evil intention or evil purpose on the subject being discussed. And this was
purposely evasive.
Purposely evasive?
Yeah, or that's the other thing I had in my notes. Either evil intentions, or they're being purposely evasive towards your questioning.
Oh,
like they're trying to hide something.
Yeah, nobody in Scientology would say they're being purposefully evasive. If you see a rock slam, it's a hidden evil intention.
Yeah, that would be the only actual tie-in to the real efficacy of an e-meter, because as I don't know if the viewers know, but an e-meter is just 1/3 of a polygraph machine. And so in a normal polygraph interview, that portion of the machine is designed to find what's the word, where you're trying to be deceptive. And so that would only efficacy in the machine. That would be the only part of the e-meter that you could actually tie to real science.
Right? Well, you can't. Yeah, okay. You have it. The only real science an e-meter is connected to, or a polygraph for that matter, is that it is measuring an objectively measurable thing. That's about the only connection it has with science. Yeah, everything past that is conjecture.
Exactly.
Everything. Okay. Exactly. What it's measuring is skin resistance. It's measuring the electrical skin, the resistance of your skin, the surface of your skin, mind you, not the inside of your body. The electronic signal that comes from the meter does not penetrate your skin and go into your body. It's not strong enough to do that. So it only flies over the surface. And skin has electrical conductivity, but it also has electrical resistance. And that resistance is shown on the needle, on the dial. When you put somebody on an e-meter, the needle starts dancing around and moving. And in Scientology, the assumption is that mental phenomena is causing that needle to move around. That itself is not a warranted assumption, but it is one that they make. And you can make people make the needle move by making them think of certain things.
That's what. Yeah.
That's it. The interpretation of what those questions mean and what your answers mean, that's where we get into fantasy land with Scientology.
It is objectively 1/3 of a normal standard polygraph test. So in a polygraph, what is that portion meant to detect?
Well, it's measuring skin resistance.
But what is it trying to do? Why is it part of a polygraph?
It's trying to measure nervousness or anxiety. However, this goes back to stereotypes because nervous people do not act consistent from one nervous person to another. Anxiety does not manifest itself in a consistently 100% uniformly workable and verifiable manner. Everybody's different. And this is where the problem lies with using machinery to try to measure emotional or mental states, is that the context is everything in this. And so the interpretation of what the needle does, it falls. Oh, you just thought of something. No, I just moved my toe.
Exactly.
Right? Or, I did just think of something. It could be either one. Legit, right? You can't tell just by looking at the needle. You need other data points. And those other data points are important. And this is what Scientology blows off, is they only pay attention to the meter. And if the needle moved, that means you have that hidden evil intention. And you're not getting up until you tell me what it is. So better get comfortable here, because you're going to find that hidden evil intention and you're going to confess it to me right now. And 5 hours later, you finally come up with something so you can get out of the room. There's a lot of backstory here. Of course, we're just kind of glossing over right now with the e-meter, but I speak forcefully about it because I want people to not give any credence to the thing, because it's important that people understand that just because a dial moves doesn't mean that there's science involved, and it doesn't mean that it's legit. And that's all I'm trying to get across.
Those people who want to give credence to it, two things I would add. Printed on every e-meter is a legal warning.
Yes.
Legally, they have to notify you that this does not really do shit.
That's right. Doesn't diagnose or cure anything, is what it specifically says on the disclaimer. And the FDA made them put that on that, by the way.
Good on them. Second is that combined with the other two aspects of a normal polygraph suite, even that is not admissible in court, the results of that. So that tells you right there. If you add the other two parts of an actual polygraph test, it's still not admissible in court. Chris, do you have any saved rounds before we go to plugs?
I'm sorry, did I have any what?
Saved round, anything that any loose threads, hanging chads, saved rounds before we go to plugs?
No, we're good. This has been really interesting. I am really impressed that you dug so deep and tried to that's good. Nobody's ever done that to me. That's awesome.
I tried to do my homework, man.
That was good.
Your plugs. I know you have a book out. I'm pretty sure you have a website. I know you have a YouTube channel. Any upcoming events, everything you want to get out there.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yes, you can buy my book or listen to it as an audiobook. It is called Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. And it is not my memoir. It is not a testimonial. It is a critical analysis of Scientology. You want to know what Scientology is? It's in there. And you're not going to get it through my experiences. You're going to get it through me telling you exactly what it is. And what L. Ron Hubbard was all about, how they got tax exemption, what those Xenu stories are all about. Because Xenu, by the way, is only this much of the story. You guys, people who watch South Park think they know all about it, and they really don't know hardly anything. It's awesome. So that's in the book. And then we have my website, which is mncriticalthinking.com. Because I used to live in Minnesota, so it was Minnesota Critical Thinker Thinking, and then I moved. So mncriticalthinking.com, you can find all my content and work and essays and things on there, and of course my YouTube channel, Chris Shelton.
All right.
Awesome,
after
man.
the show, if you could just send me those links too, so I can put those in the description section.
Absolutely.
Again, I want to stress because in my 3 a.m. workup to researching this, I found so many disturbing. The fact that they would have the gall to just air dirty laundry. 99% of it has nothing to do with you as a former Scientologist. They're just trying to just rub mud on you and dehumanize you. And it's gross. It was despicable. And I really want to stress, and this is coming from a Marine that really has been, my whole life is about security. It's about making people safe. And I really want to ensure that you are safe, for lack of a better word.
Thank you very much. And
I don't know if maybe you're glossing over it. You might be just, it
maybe a little bit.
I want you to be more worried than you are.
Well, I appreciate that. And okay. I am not unaware of the dangers and consequences of what I do. And I know the threat isn't only from Scientology. And I really do get that. And there are certain safeguards in place in my life. And I'm doing the best that I can. But to me, the way more important thing is to get the truth out there. So,
through the course of our conversation, I wrote down what I believe the title will be, and I'm just going to say it now. If this is not the title, this is what I'm thinking of originally. 4 quadrillion years is a long ass time.
It is. It is. That's a long time.
Thank you so much, Chris Shelton, and I hope to have you back on the show.
Awesome, man. I'm sure we can make it happen.
All right. Take care.